Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and Friends of Baylor. We did some different things last week, and apparently people didn't like it. So I got a lot of comments about, what about COVID? I thought, it'd be nice to take a break from COVID. And of course, what about Lily? Where was Lily? Well, it turns out Lily was in mini dachshund camp. I sent her there to try to learn to be more sociable and pleasant.
Hello, Dr. Klotman. We regret to inform you that Lily has been removed from mini dachshund camp due to bad behavior. She doesn't appear to be getting along with the other doggy campers. We provided every camper with a mini dachshund t-shirt. We have no idea where she got that attire and the bling bling she's wearing. Please come get your dog and don't bring her back.
And she was kicked out, and she came back with a Run DMC sweatshirt, so I'm not sure what happened, but she didn't do well in camp. But she's back now, and it's all good. Well, this week is going to be tough because we're going to explore politics and COVID. I'm going to say right now, I am completely independent. I'm dead in the middle of the road of everything. So don't blame me for any of the data. But first, a little politics. So this is bugging me, and I have to share this with you. Because, President Bush had he had many accomplishments, but his most spectacular accomplishment, in my opinion, was the starting of PEPFAR. He began that in 2003, and that was called the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And it was credited really with saving over 20 million lives in sub-Saharan Africa. And he did, it was really a wonderful thing, and it was in response to the problems in Africa. In 2000, for example, Botswana's President Moai declared to the UN General Assembly that due to the AIDS pandemic, his people faced extinction. And as a result, PEPFAR was formed. We partnered with Bristol Myers Squibb, and we started BPI, which was the Baylor International Pediatric AIDS Initiative. And that program was really quite remarkable, as it accomplished great things in collaboration with PEPFAR and Bristol Myers Squibb. And we started in 2003 the Botswana Baylor Children's Clinical Center of Excellence. And it, in the first year, took care of 1,200 kids with HIV and has now been taking care of well over 200, almost 250,000 children. And that model proved to be so successful that we were approached to start similar clinics in Lesotho, Eswatini, Malawi, Tanzania, and Uganda. And again, these have been wildly successful, and PEPFAR has been an instrumental part of that. PEPFAR used about $100 billion over the years in 50 different countries, had a huge impact on Africa. It was really a great program. And the reason I mention this, it is now bogged down in a political fight because there's some accusation that some of the money is being used to support abortions in Africa. Now, I don't know what's going on, but this is a program that really needs to be renewed, and its funding is set to expire September 30th. So if you know anybody who has any influence, tell them to fund PEPFAR. It's very important. So it's really interesting what's going on with COVID. I've been talking about over the last 6 to 7 months, we've been watching a steady decline in COVID. But remember, about 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that it was a little problematic that the wastewater numbers weren't going down, and in fact, now it looks like we're having an uptick in COVID. Now, I have so many friends who've had a cold over the summer that they say, I had a cold, but didn't test, and my guess is many of those summer colds that people are having are actually SARS-CoV-2, and if you tested, you'd know. And here's what's going on. So you can see in the number of specimens being tested, these are percent positive per week. You can see that the number of SARS-CoV-2 numbers are going way up. Meanwhile, RSV and flu are not. So does that mean anything? Well, yes. It shows right now we're beginning to see an uptick in hospitalizations due to COVID. So this is sort of a late summer surge, and my guess is it will continue to go up in the fall. And the reason for that is if you look at wastewater numbers, if you recall 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was down in the 30% area. Now we're up to 46% of the wastewater sites in the United States are reporting either increases of up to 100% or over 100%. And where is most of that happening? Most of it's really solidly in the Midwest. You can see most of these are showing an increase. There's some also in Houston and some in New York. And if you look at the Houston city data, it's actually pretty remarkable. We're going up in almost every single surveillance site. And we're at now 135% of the level that we had when we first started the program in the middle of the pandemic, July 6, 2020. So there is a lot of virus around. It's going up in many communities. The good news is that it's mostly, an upper respiratory infection, summer cold, but it is in the elderly beginning to be a problem, and we're seeing an increase in hospitalization. So we need to watch it. And obviously as the fall approaches, we're going to all need to get vaccinated against it. And I'll talk a bit, we can talk about that as the vaccines become more available in September, October. Interestingly enough, there was a paper in Nature Communications that looked at, is wastewater really the best way to do surveillance? And these authors evaluated weekly hospitalizations in 159 counties across 45 states. And what they found was if you followed wastewater accurately preceded the increase in hospitalizations between 1 and 4 weeks in advance of the increase in hospitalization. So this has really turned out to be a very powerful tool to monitor new infections and even the ones we know about. And so we're very much engaged with the CDC and our local community here in creating a very robust surveillance using wastewater. And what are the variants? They're all variants of XBB, almost all of them. There is this EG.5, but most of them are XBB variants. So the vast majority, 99%. So all these represent minor mutations in the spike protein. And just to remind you, the B lineage, which is what these are, it came from Europe, but is really dominant in the United States. 40% of the strains are in the United States. And you can see these are all those mutations. They're all closely related to the XBB 1.5 variant. Even the EG.5 comes from a common variant, XBB. So when you think about, well, how do you design vaccines? We're certainly going to want to have an XBB vaccine, but I'm hopeful we have at least a trivalent vaccine, hopefully in the spring. Probably should be the original variation and 2 are the most dominant variants. We'll see. So one other quick paper on long COVID. It's interesting, a paper published out of the United Kingdom showed that for people who had long COVID symptoms after 12 weeks, they had persistent problems with memory, reasoning, motor control for up to 2 years after the infection. So long COVID really is a problem, and it's going to be a big issue as we go forward. And our cameraman just dropped some. Way to go, Billy. Okay.
So I've got no ID now.
Now, no ID. Throw them out. Okay. Now, here's where I'm going to get in trouble because this is an interesting paper that came from Yale. I just can't. This is how does politics influence COVID? And I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. All of my Republican friends got vaccinated, except for one. It was a wife of a friend. Go figure. And then all my Democrat friends also got vaccinated. But this was a really interesting thing. Does party affiliation have any impact on excess mortality? And in this cohort study, they looked at 538,000 deaths in individuals aged 25 years or older in Florida and Ohio, 2 states that have both blue and red. And this is really fascinating. What they found was before the vaccine became available, there was absolutely no difference in mortality between Democrats and Republicans. But after it was available, there was a significantly higher excess mortality in Republican voters than Democratic voters. And they concluded there's probably differences in vaccine attitudes in the 2 parties. And so as we go into the election season, it's another thing to think about. Another interesting thing is looking at Florida. When the governor was very positive about vaccines, Florida actually was one of the states that had the lowest mortality from COVID. But after they switched his view and thought, well, they're not that important, Florida then exceeded mortality than everybody else. So vaccine opinions do have a big difference in mortality and outcome. So it is important to think about. I'm not making a value comment about Democrats or Republicans, just stating that these vaccine opinions really do influence outcomes. So I want to end today with some shout-outs. First of all, we have a new McNair Scholar. Dr. Yudun Gao, Assistant Professor in the Department of Neuroscience, has been named the newest of our McNair scholars. His research focuses on molecular mechanisms of brain conditions and synaptic and axonal networks. We also want to congratulate Dr. Cheryl Walker. She and her graduate student, Alyssa Paparella, are new Gillum Fellows Program awardees. And this is like a Howard Hughes program that looks at mentor-student pairs, and in particularly excellent ones, rewards them a fellowship. And finally, a final shout out to Dr. Ken Lau, Professor and Chief of the Division of Cardiothoracic Transplantation and Circulatory Support in the Michael DeBakey Department of Surgery. He performed his 500th robotic heart surgery just this past July. He's one of very few people who do this, and he's one of the top people in the nation. And congratulations to Dr. Lau for his outstanding work. And finally, of course, my sister's coming to town for the weekend. God help me. But I hope to get through it, and I'll report on all the happenings next week when I see you. So have a wonderful weekend, and I can't wait to see you